My regrets look just like texts I shouldn't send. And I got neighbors, they're more like strangers, we could be friends. I just need a way out.
All right. Hey, you guys. Welcome to The Life We Lived. It's been a hot minute since I have done one of these episodes, actually about a year and a half. And I think it's time that we jump back into this. For the ones of you that followed the videos before, you know that I started this as a tribute to my son, Zach, that passed away April 26th of 2019. So yesterday was his 2-year Angel Day. And I have been wanting to bring this back into my life, and today is the day. So today I have with me on my panel my girlfriend Kat, who is kind of used to be my neighbor, but then we just morphed into friends and we are just super close, and my friend Dana. And I bring Dana in today as a specialist. So she is actually, and I wrote it down because I can't remember anything. Transformational and mindset coach? What does that mean, Dana?
So I'm actually certified in 5 different coaching types, and they're all coaching types. And so transformational and mindset, they're both about growth, but they take different paths. So mindset, you may work on changing limiting beliefs about yourself. Like, you know, somebody somewhere told you can't do something. And so you figure out what that is and you try to change that. It helps with like overwhelm and procrastination. And then transformationals, you know, pretty much the gamut. You're going from point A to point B, and all the exercises and things you may need to do to get there. You know, it can cover self-esteem, and, you know, it can cover people pleasing. It can cover a variety of things, but we're, you know, trying to go from, you know, you come to me and say, you know, I really want to change in this kind of way, and step by step, we take you there.
And how much of that component is mental health? Just really all of it in a roundabout way?
That's an interesting question. So the difference between, I can say right now, there's a difference between coaching and therapy. And therapy helps you deal with your past, where coaching helps take you into your future. So, you know, you have to have, you know, dealt with the past on some level. Mm-hmm. However, a lot of therapy doesn't actually start moving you into the person you need to become. And that's where life coaching can actually pick up that baton and start helping you move forward. So it does absolutely vastly improve your mental health, because like I was just talking about with, you know, limiting beliefs, if you're sitting there all the time thinking you can't do something, you think, oh, I'm just stupid, or, you know, I'm not smart enough. It helps you change that attitude. Mm-hmm. And you get to see maybe the instances in your life where these things aren't true. Mm-hmm. And the places where you can build on that. And that's where coaching really can help you in that kind of aspect. It helps with anxiety and depression and gives you tools that you can use.
And probably breaking cycles too.
Yeah, absolutely.
How to break cycles and then get yourself into a way that you're out of that place. Yes. Well, so Kat and I are both very familiar with therapy. We both do that on a regular basis. And with her and I, you know, she's quite a bit younger than me, but in her, in our talkings and dealings with each other, we found that our lives are very similar. I feel, you know, in talking to her, like she's just a younger version of me in so many ways. She got her shit together better than I did, but I mean, overall, and it's always so interesting for me with talking with Kat, because, you know, she'll call me about, hey, I'm thinking something's weird, and we kind of start talking, right, girl?
Yep. Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a time where we haven't had at least 45-minute conversations.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, bouncing things, ideas, and current situations and past situations. So she gets me and I get her. And one thing that we have in common is basically what I really want to talk about tonight. With losing Zach, I mean, there's, definitely the grief involved, and been grieving now for 2 years. And some ways I'm in a better place. Some ways, I'm just managing. So that alone is its own episode, its own, dealing with grief. But what I want to talk about today is a specific type of grief. And I kind of made this phrase up. I haven't Googled it to see if anybody else uses it. But what I call a grief from taboo death. So taboo death meaning suicide, meaning overdose, meaning maybe being a drunk driver and you're the one, the drunk driver that dies versus, the killing of the other people. Things that just society just kind of frowns upon, and it isn't really acceptable. And it is, I find it in my situation, sometimes it's very hard for people to, know what words to say. I don't know about you, Kat, but in my situation, there's been times where maybe I haven't, it's been 2 years, and there's people that are just now reaching out to me because they tell me they just didn't know what to say. They just didn't have the words.
Yeah.
You too?
I've run into that a lot. And with my father, I mean, all death is, I guess, violent in some way, but with my father, it was a very violent suicide. On top of that, it was with a gun. And you tell somebody that and they just go silent. They either go silent or and I feel for them. Most people, I think, don't deal with suicide in a very intimate way. I think maybe somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, but not necessarily somebody in your inner circle. Most people don't. So I get that it's hard to figure out what to say, but it's either they don't say anything at all or change the subject or do that, what I hate, toxic positivity stuff, where it's just very dismissive. Mm-hmm. Or, yeah, I'm like, I'm okay with like positivity, but there's a limit where it becomes
yeah, I know, I'm with you on that. I did a whole thing last month on my page about toxic positivity.
Yes.
Wow.
I tried to explain that to my boyfriend and he didn't quite understand what I was talking about because he's very kind of like that. And I'm like, there's a limit. There is.
Yeah.
But they either do that or something that you had experienced when we were at the hot spot, where they bring their own personal beliefs into it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they get a little too, I don't know what the word is about it. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Overbearing.
Oh yeah, that's a good word. That's a good
well,
word.
And I think for most people it's done, in good intention.
Mm-hmm.
And from your perspective, Dana, I would like to hear as a professional, like, when you're coming across people that are really grieving, something is really fresh for them. I mean, what do you feel is a proper kind of realistic approach to, not, of course, your tight circle, that's a different story. But I mean, just, acquaintances or even strangers, if I'm walking up to you and saying, hey, something comes up and then we find out that your father passed last week. I mean, what do you think is the proper way for a person to approach that?
Okay. Well, I'll start taking a short step back from that, in addressing why you were saying that most people have good intentions, and you're absolutely right that a lot of people do. Now, unfortunately, some people don't have the empathy, or are too involved. We were talking about the overbearing cat. Are too involved in their religious beliefs. They can't think a little bit outside of that. There are some people that are definitely more callous, but when these things are said, genuinely, people mean them well. The problem is is that it's so very awkward and people don't know how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a society where, and I see this a lot of times in my practice because I treat people, I specialize in codependency and complex post-traumatic stress disorder issues. And something from that is the people pleasing aspect of it. And you want to fix things. You want to fix. And we have to get it through our heads that we can't fix other people. We can't fix situations. So no matter how uncomfortable you are and you desperately want to say something that's going to fix it, the only appropriate response besides, of course, the obvious, I'm so sorry to hear that, is I'm here for you if you want someone to talk to. And if you just want someone to listen, I'll just sit here with you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
we have to start getting
what do
comfortable.
you feel though about people that, and I've had this so many times, and not just strangers, but the first thing, what happened, how'd they die?
That's a morbid curiosity. I don't know if it's because we're a social media world or what, that people feel that that's appropriate right off the bat. And you'll see it when somebody, passes away on Facebook. You'll see somebody inevitably in the comments will say, how'd he go? How'd he pass?
Mm-hmm.
That isn't the time or place. Slow your roll just a little bit.
Right.
You got to give people space and time to process. You'll eventually know. It's just, you have to learn appropriate time and place. And these are, there's boundaries. And unfortunately with social media, especially, we've become a nation of boundary breakers.
Mm-hmm.
That everyone thinks your life belongs to them, or you think your life belongs to everyone. And that's not true. In fact, actually, when spilling your guts on social media, it puts people in very awkward situations.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have to learn to take a step back and have a little bit of decorum. It's not hiding anything, but you have to learn how to be vulnerable with the appropriate people. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be vulnerable with the whole world. That should be saved for trusted people. Or you get into problems like that, people can take advantage of you. They know your weaknesses. Right. I see it all the time with people who are survivors of narcissistic abuse. So, that puts you in such an awkward position. If someone comes right up to you and go, well, how'd they die?
Right.
Well,
for me, I'm blunt. I'm pretty open. And I have been, since the day Zach's died. People have point blank asked me, and I'm point blank, he overdosed. And then I'll get the next question. Well, what did he overdose on? And I'm, and me being me, well, and I'll say he overdosed on heroin. He did. And I'm okay with I'm okay with giving the answer and giving the truth. I'm not so sure the other person is so okay with what they just heard. And then it puts them in a place of, oh shit, this is awkward. So in my opinion, unless you really are prepared and really want to have that discussion, be careful what you ask, because it may not, be, oh, he was 80 and had cancer for 10 years or Alzheimer's or had been sick, this could be something, and especially when it's someone, younger, you really have to empathize with that parent or that child or the sibling, because they're still processing whatever the hell is going on, and not all people are like me that are open to talk about it, Kat, in your situation, you were how old when your dad passed?
I was 15.
Okay. And then at that age, being a teenager, like, how was that with your peers and with your family? How did that work with you?
My grieving process was unnecessarily difficult, honestly, because of my mother, who is a narcissist. And
So we have a lot to talk about, is what you're saying.
she did what narcissists do, and she made his death about him, or about her. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, I can see it.
Yeah, it wasn't her grieving minor child. It wasn't the pain that her ex-husband was in. It was all about her. And so my grieving process at home was very lonely. And of course, I was 15. I don't know what to do at that point.
Sure.
And then with my peers, it was didn't even know how to begin to explain that. I went back to school my sophomore year, 10 days after we buried him. After we cremated him. And I didn't know what to say to anybody. I know the school counselor knew, my mom had told them, but I didn't know what to say. And the couple of people that I felt comfortable telling, I mean, they're teenagers just like me. It was extremely awkward and uncomfortable.
Right.
And I was the kind of person that was friends with everybody. And so I would hear these teenagers like, God, I hate my dad. God, I hate my dad. God, I hate this. He didn't let me go to a party. And I would hear these things and it would make me so mad. And it would either make me cry or I wanted to kick their ass. I'm like, you know what? At least you have a father to be mad at for not letting you get the crop top that's going to show your belly and everything else. All right. At least you have a father to be mad at. Right. And so my grieving process was just extremely lonely. I didn't know anybody my age who could even remotely understand or been through what I've been through. The only other person that I could even remotely relate to was my sister, but for the longest time, her and I had a really strained relationship, which growing up how we did, it makes sense. And so it was just me, just trying to figure it out.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot on it.
That is so much. Yeah, no, I was about to say, I'm so sorry that, you had to go through that and be so alone through that, because no matter the age, worse at, being 15, definitely, I would say, but no matter the age, no one should have to go through that by themselves.
No, definitely not. That's one thing, with Zach's death. I was very fortunate in having a very nice, and not just the close support, but the support that came from everybody. I mean, everybody was just so generous and kind, and giving. He died in California, and having to bring him back, and everybody I know chipped in and helped in one capacity or another, for me to bring my son home and have a service. And, I at least didn't have to worry about all that, and behind the scenes, I had a whole other gamut of issues that I was dealing with, just regarding some things that just didn't make sense to me. So, still working on that. But I feel though, and I really felt it for the first probably 6 months, because I never publicized Zach's addiction. It wasn't that I was never shameful of him. I was never shameful of his addiction. I had been around addiction before. I'm very familiar with how it gets you and consumes you. And and hell, my kid just liked drugs. So I actually had to get past the point mentally, though, that I somehow did something to drive him to using, which ended up driving him to dying. Right. So the it's my fault, thing. And I'm sure to a degree as a child, I don't know if you felt that, Kat, in any way, but I think a lot of survivors of suicide take, this is somehow my fault.
I did. It was slightly different, of course, because our situation was different, and our relationship was different. He was the parent, I was the child. But my dad, it was a month before he died, he had dropped me off at my sister's, because at the time she was 19. So he dropped me off at my sister's to hang out for a weekend, and then just kept not picking me up. And at one point just stopped answering my calls. So I went a whole month just sporadically getting calls from him. He just basically left me there.
Mhm.
And then I eventually called my mom. She came and picked me up. And so I was with my mom when he called my sister and I, wanted to take us to lunch on a Saturday. He died on a Sunday. And I remember when he took us to lunch on Saturday, he looked awful, just absolutely awful. Like there was something really wrong with him. I knew it. One of the conversations we had was, he said, "I want you to tell me every awful thing that I ever did to you guys." And of course, we're teenagers, so we're like thinking, okay, maybe he's having some epiphany and we can have a better relationship with our father, because he wasn't the best father. I mean, he wasn't as awful as my mother, but he was not the best father. And we're like, okay. And so we just kind of laid it out, and he was really quiet, and he was like, okay. And he dropped her off, and then he dropped me off. I remember when I got out of the car, something told me, you better go home with him. But I was so angry at the last month and everything else that I was like, I don't want to. And so I leaned down in the car and I was like, I love you. And he goes, I love you too. And I said, Daddy, I love you. And he goes, okay, thank you, and drove off. And that was the last thing that I said to him. And thank God that was the last thing that I said to him.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, though, at least for about the first 6 months, I don't feel this way anymore, but for about the first 6 months, thinking that, not that I drove him to suicide, but if I had been there that night, I don't think he would have done it with me in the house. But I can't be there every day. At some point, he would have found a way to have done it.
And Zach, not Zach, Jake, my other son, both of us went through that, feeling, there's this, I didn't do enough. I mean, Zach's addiction, Zach was 29 when he died, and his addiction really started, he started really dabbling at 18, but the 20 from 20 to 23, 20, well, really about 26 was when it was really heavy. And part of that time, in the beginning, I was in such denial as to what he was doing. He was a really good little fibber. And so I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't realize at that age, he actually had started heroin. I didn't realize that. I didn't find out that he started that young actually until after he died. And there were things that had happened that, I was like, I know he's using something. I know it's not weed. I don't think it's coke. And I'm not sure, what he's doing. There were signs, but I would talk myself out of it like this, and then he actually overdosed prior, and it was he had moved to Chile for a year, and Zach seemed to do better when he was away from here, from Austin. He moved to Chile at one time. He had lived in California before. He traveled a lot. So those times he did, stayed pretty clean. But after he got home from Chile, it was about 6 months after he had gotten home, and he was using again. And at the time he was living with his brother, and, went in to take a shower, and 30 minutes later, wasn't coming out, whatever. And basically, long story short, he had overdosed, and he had flatlined. His heart wasn't beating, nothing. He died. And Jake and Zach's best friend were able to resuscitate him. So after that, and we had another instance early in his 20s where he overdid some things. He didn't overdose, but he way overdid it. And so there were 2 different times specifically that, let's do rehab, got something lined up. This is what we're going to do. Either inpatient, outpatient, I don't care. Just do something. And I don't have a problem, Mom. I do this when I want to. It's not an addiction. It's just because I want to. And so, after he died, Jake and I both felt like, well, if he had just been here, if he would just been home. And I told Jake, son, he overdosed in the damn house with you. So we can't change that. The sad thing is he had actually been clean when he died. He was clean. It was a fluke that somebody gave him some stuff and he used it, and it was laced with fentanyl, and he died. And I mean, the coroner had even told me, Cristal, I do not want you beating yourself up thinking your son had relapsed, because the amount of heroin in his system was so minor, And so I felt at that time, it was this ongoing, what could I done? I should have done more. But then I also felt people were giving me that vibe. Well, what did you do to help him? How long did you put him in rehab? As a mother, there's no way I could let my child live in addiction. Like, try hearing that, when your son's died.
So people actually said that to you?
Yeah, I had somebody say that to me, that there was no way as a mother that they could let their son live like that.
I mean, it's not surprising. Mothers get a lot of blame for everything that their child does, not even remotely close to what fathers get blamed for. Like mothers.
This child hasn't lived at home in 11 years.
That's what I was about to say. He was a grown-ass man.
He was a grown-ass man.
How are you going to do anything about that? I mean, seriously.
I know. And I think part of this, in this kind of taboo death situation, is something that I really do want to get the point across.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is that person's decision.
Yes.
Whether they stuck a needle in their arm, overdosed, committed suicide, it is not about you. And even if they say it's about you, it's not about you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
your journey is seriously 100% about you. Like, it doesn't matter that my mother was a narcissist who abused me. It didn't matter that I had a best friend who was a narcissist that abused me. It doesn't matter. I had to make the decision of what I do with my life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those were circumstances that brought me down, but you are responsible for your life, especially at a certain age. Now, being a teenager, Kat, that can be a little bit different. Because especially if you're living in a home or anything like that. But as we just said, like with Cristal, it's like I think you just stunned me with that.
No.
Because
he
was not at home.
He wasn't home. He lived halfway across the country.
You know what?
And I think it's good that you said that, though. Here's the thing: is there was so much detail in what you just said, and I think that should bring out to people that A, don't be judging the situation. 2, there's so much more to it than he overdosed.
Right.
That you are not, obligated to tell anybody.
I know, but there's this weird part in my brain that, and I know Kat caught me doing it the other day, when I was asked, and I answered, he overdosed, but I catch myself like, he wasn't currently actively an addict. Like, he was clean. So I'm sitting here like trying to protect him, which I'm gonna, as his mom, protect him. But I'm also not in denial about his life and his lifestyle in all those years, and while I didn't condone it, I never, is something coming up on your screen, you guys?
I got a little pop-up.
Huh?
Yeah.
Got a little
great.
pop-up, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're gonna hope that. Sorry.
We're going.
We're loving Zoom though. Zoom, thank you so much for asking. But I mean, I was never in denial of my son's addiction. Where I was wrong, though, all those years that he was addicted, I beat the shit out of myself, because he started this really dabbling in drugs at, high school and then getting addicted. And I always put it back into, well, his father wasn't ever in his life. He didn't know his dad. I was working nonstop all the time, a single mom of 2 kids. I had my own issues and relationships that brought instability into my kids' homes, and they just never had like a father figure. And Zach started having signs of depression like in middle school, and I started getting him what I tried as therapy, and he just wasn't having it. So all this time, I'm blaming his addiction on myself. I mean, the whole time. And I will tell you, after he died, I was going to do one of these episodes with his best friend. And I couldn't do, we filmed the whole thing, but then I was like, I can't show this to anybody because 1, it gave way more information about my child than I felt anybody needed to know. I wanted to respect his privacy. But the one thing I asked his friend Quincy was, telling him, do you feel like Zach was using as a coping mechanism? His words, no, mama, he just liked drugs. And it was like that simplest thing. He said, Cristal, he never talked about doing this to hide pain or he just liked it, And honestly, it's like, the people that bungee jump and skydive and do all these crazy things. Adrenaline junkies, and they end up dying. I started seeing my son more in that category.
Yeah.
Than the addiction category.
Personally, I think with people who do that, all forms of victim blaming like that, because that's exactly what it is, I stopped trying to take it so personally because I realized that the main reason why they're doing it is because when they see these things happen that seem random and uncontrollable, it scares them. Yep. And they need some semblance of control. So if they can say, well, that would never happen to me because I wouldn't allow it to happen, well, then that gives them the sense of, okay, yeah, that's never going to happen to me because I would be in control of it and I could fix it and I could do this and I could do that. And so it alleviates that fear when the reality is that you really can't control.
No.
It could also just be simple projection as well. That could be going on in their lives.
So one thing, because I know we've probably only got about 8 minutes or so left. Dana made a post the other day, and I want to talk about that. Kind of give a quick synopsis of what you wrote.
Sure. So I was talking about, I was doing this series about well-intentioned bad advice. And so just talking about people who have, good intentions. However, what comes out of their mouth is not anything that you should take. But it's people who do.
Like, I'm listening to you, but you're totally full of shit.
Right. But the problem is people don't view it as that, and they get hurt by it. And that's why it's well-intentioned bad advice. So I was talking about the people that say a variety of things along this vein. Everything happens for a reason. It's all part of God's plan.
Right.
These are not the things that you want to say to somebody who's grieving.
No.
It only makes you feel better. Look at me. I gave them such wonderful advice. I am so cool. But that other person is feeling dismissed. They're feeling invalidated.
Yeah.
I've had so many people who have grieved and have come to me after this post, or even on the post itself, and have said, oh, well, my husband or my child passing. Oh, that was God's plan.
Right.
Wasn't it? Right. That happened for a good reason, did it? Yeah. You can't tell a person who's grieving, oh, it's for a greater good.
No.
What?
I can tell you there's no way in hell it was God's plan for my child to stick a needle in his arm and die.
It's a greater good. Then why is it that I'm the only one that's suffering then? Why are we not all suffering together?
It's ludicrous to even think that. It's ludicrous to also think. I mean, also I told this to Cristal. I taught a Bible study for several years. Not only the people with the God's plan, God is in control, along goes with everything happens for a reason. It's not biblical either, by the way. So, I mean, it's just what people.
No, I mean, we have free will, right?
Do what?
We have free will, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sure, do we need to take our circumstances and, do the best we can with them? Absolutely. I mean, do I like that I was narcissistically abused? Absolutely not. Have I used it for a greater good? Absolutely. I made something good come of it, but that was my responsibility. I could have not done that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to sit there and say it's part of God's plan or whatever, but again, it really, really hurts the person that's grieving. You didn't do a great thing by giving that advice. Mm-hmm. You just totally invalidated them in any of their feelings.
Yeah. And I mean, as much as I believe in a higher being, I sure the hell don't want to be told that my son is in a better place.
Yeah, if God feels the need,
my son would be in a better place if he was sitting with me and his brother last night watching sports. I mean, that would be my son in a better place. My son, I can understand that terminology if it's somebody like, say, that had been ill for years or, something like that to where they're suffering. My child had been clean. He was happy. He was, in a place where he loved. Him dying did not put him in a better place. And I don't know religiously how. I mean, I don't get that.
And what you guys are demonstrating right now is how the person who's grieving is feeling. Mm-hmm. And so that I think this is really good for everyone to hear that side of it.
Yeah.
Because
what about you?
People go on about doing this because it makes them feel better.
Yeah.
It's not designed to make you feel better. It's designed for them to overcome their awkwardness of the situation, where all they need to say is, "I'm here for you." That's it. You're off the hook. That's all you need to say, people. That's all that needs to come out of your mouth. Let nothing else happen. Even if they're terminally ill, Cristal, because that's still a pain point.
Okay.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just we need to learn how to save space for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sit in the awkward silence, but don't say a damn word until they want you to say something. Nothing you have to say is gonna fix it.
Have you had those scenarios, Kat? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part for me, especially with it being suicide, is that you're naturally, the survivors, your feelings are naturally going to be more dismissed anyway. To me, suicide is more insidious in the fact that if somebody gets into an accident or they get hit by a car, that it's an illness or something, there's a reason, there's an explanation, we're good, we don't need to talk about it. But when it comes to suicide, either accidental or intentional, the focus then becomes, well, why were they in so much pain? Well, why do you think they did that? And it becomes entirely focused on them and their pain. And then you're even more dismissed now because I'm like, well, here's the thing. I don't know why they did that. I will never understand truly why my father did it.
But I'm devastated over here.
Right. But I'm like, I'm right here. I'm present. I'm the one hurting. Can we talk about my pain? But why do you think he did that? I mean, God, he must have been so sad. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about his pain, the pain of somebody who's dead and no longer.
I'm just like, I'm appalled and I'm just so sorry, y'all. Like, I'm just like sitting here just, wow.
I mean, I will tell you, for the most part, I mean, those situations have not been the norm. Right. For the most part, everybody has been gracious and understanding and given me space. And I took space. I mean, I just had to, but for the most part, everybody's been really good. The few situations that I've had that have been negative have been either from people I really didn't even know. you know, maybe an acquaintance that I just kind of seen out here and there. But most of it is from people that I don't know. And I think it's just such an awkwardness that, like you say, they feel like they need to say something. And they just a simple, I'm sorry. Even a, can I give you a hug is fine. I mean, but, you know, we don't need to, you know, let the person that is grieving initiate the conversations when they're ready, you know, because there's, you know, I know with Kat, I know for her in her life, I'm assuming, you know, you haven't had a lot of people to talk to about it. And I think even now, I mean, a lot of her and my conversations are regarding, you know, her dad and the trauma and where that trauma brings you today. And that's a whole other topic that I want to do another episode on, is the trickle effect of what happens to the survivors after after death, because I think people are, I think they really underestimate what all goes on. I mean, you know, you don't just pick up next week and let's go. I mean, you know, it's just life. I mean, I do. It's been 2 years. I feel like life has basically stood still, you know, and I see the world moving around me, but I feel like I don't even, you know, I was telling my boyfriend last night, I don't even know if I've even made any progress or what. I mean, I feel like I'm just, I know I have, but I don't, I kept thinking I was going to go back to the old me. And it has taken me 2 years to realize she died with my child. So you're still mourning. You're not only mourning the person that died, you're mourning the person within yourself that you lost. And that is difficult, you know.
Well, let me tell you something. First of all, I want to commend both of you women, because I mean, you're being advocates, you're out there, you're speaking about this. And I think that's a wonderful use of a truly awful situation. So thank you both for doing that. I do want to say something about traumatic events. You know, you can never go back to the way you were, but I will say that over time and with healing, you can be possibly better than you were before.
That's what
after any kind of traumatic event, you never want to go back to the way you are, but you do want to grow forward.
Yeah.
And
that's what we're striving for. That's why we're back doing this again, you know, because
and be gentle too on yourselves, because everyone grieves in their own time, and you only did the best you could with the information you had at the time.
Yeah.
You know, always be gentle about your past. Grieve at your own pace. That is for you and you. Toxic positivity, just let it go. I mean, you can't, you take the time for you that you need, whether that's, you know, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm 5 years recovering from the last traumatic event in my life. And, you know, it takes a long time.
Yeah, it does.
But it's so worth it. But just hang in there. You're fine. You're going to be fine. Any progress, even if it's this big, still something. And then Cristal, geez, we've been dealing with COVID for the last year. No one's made any progress.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I need to wrap this up so that we don't get disconnected here. But the one thing I kind of want to close with is just, you know, people be conscientious of other people's emotions and their feelings, because what you may feel is appropriate may not be for them. Not everybody is a believer of God. Not everybody wants to be prayed over. Not everybody wants to be hugged. Not everybody wants to hear your 2 cents or your story, you know, in relation to what's happened in your life. Just be conscientious of that person. Let them have their moment. And if, you know, just be there for them. The best therapy is when the survivor is ready to talk. Don't force the conversation. The survivor has to be ready. So anyway, with that, I want to thank you. We wanted to wish Ms. Dana happy birthday. And
Thank you very much.
thank you so much for doing this, guys. And we will see you soon. Peace out.
Thank you.
Bye.
In my own way, just feel like living some alternate reality. And I was drowning, but now I'm swimming through stressful water.